Christmas, a season wrapped in joy, warmth, and the nostalgia of childhood dreams. Twinkling lights, cheerful carols, and the promise of a magical visitor in a red suit. For most, it's a time of comfort and wonder. But for some, the season hides shadows darker than the longest winter nights. Our family was supposed to have a perfect Christmas that year, a fresh start in a new home, away from the chaos of the city. My parents saw it as an opportunity to make new memories and start traditions in a house that seemed like it was plucked straight from a holiday postcard. But Christmas magic has two faces, and that year, we met its sinister side. It began with a Santa figurine, a harmless decoration, or so we thought. But by the time the bells jingled their final note, we realized the truth. Not all Santas come bearing gifts. Some come to collect. We moved into the old house on Cedar Lane a week before Christmas. It was massive, its architecture boasting the charm of a forgotten era. My dad had purchased it for a steal, calling it an early Christmas miracle. At first glance, it seemed perfect. Towering ceilings, vintage wooden floors, and a stone fireplace that looked like it had witnessed decades of Christmas cheer. Mom wasted no time decking the halls. Garland draped across the banisters, stockings hung by the fireplace, and every window was framed by twinkling lights. Yet, as festive as it looked, the house felt wrong. From the moment we moved in, I noticed the silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a winter's night. It was oppressive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. While unpacking in the attic, I stumbled across it. Tucked into the corner, buried beneath moth-eaten blankets, was a Santa figurine. It was 3 feet tall, made of wood, with faded red paint and a beard that had turned an unpleasant shade of yellow. Its eyes were large, glassy, and unsettlingly lifelike. "Look at this creepy thing," I muttered, holding it up. "Oh, that's adorable," Mom exclaimed. "It's vintage. It'll go perfectly by the fireplace." I wanted to protest, to tell her that there was something off about it, but she was already carrying it downstairs, oblivious to the way its lifeless eyes seemed to follow us. That night, as the snow fell steadily outside, the house should have felt cozy. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the shadows dancing on my bedroom walls. A faint jingling sound echoed through the house. At first, I thought it was the wind rattling the decorations. Then came the creak of floorboards outside my room. I sat up, heart pounding. "Mom? Dad?" No answer. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the faint jingle continued, leading me toward the stairs. I leaned over the banister and shone the light into the living room below. The Santa figurine, which had been placed by the fireplace, was now standing in the middle of the room. My breath caught. No, not happening. I ran back to my room and shut the door. The next morning, I told my parents. They laughed it off, claiming I must have been imagining things. Danny, my little brother, found it hilarious. "Maybe Santa's real," he joked. Over the next few days, the Santa figurine moved. We'd find it in the kitchen at the bottom of the stairs, even in my parents' room once. My dad joked that it was Danny playing pranks, but Danny swore it wasn't him. "I think it's alive," he whispered to me one night. "Don't say stuff like that," I snapped, though I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be right. On Christmas Eve, the tension in the house was unbearable. Mom insisted on one last family night by the fireplace. We drank hot cocoa, exchanged stories, and tried to ignore the heavy silence that had fallen over the house. The Santa figurine was back by the fireplace, but something about it had changed. Its smile seemed sharper, its eyes darker. As the clock struck midnight, the power went out. "Must be the snowstorm," Dad muttered, grabbing a flashlight. The room plunged into darkness. save for the faint glow of the fireplace. That's when we heard it. The faint sound of bells, growing louder. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, gripping Danny's arm. Then came the laugh, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. I turned the flashlight toward the fireplace. The Santa figurine was gone. A loud crash echoed from the kitchen. My dad, ever the skeptic, went to investigate. Mom followed, leaving Danny and me in the living room. Minutes passed. Then a scream, a blood-curdling cry that made my stomach drop. We ran to the kitchen, but it was empty. The back door stood wide open, snow blowing inside. "Mom? Dad!" I called out, but the only response was a faint jingling of bells. Danny clung to me, his face pale. "We have to get out of here." I nodded, grabbing his hand. But as we turned to leave, the Santa figurine appeared in the doorway. Its glassy eyes glowed faintly red, and its painted smile twisted into something far more sinister. "Run!" I screamed, pulling Danny toward the stairs. The figurine moved with unnatural speed, its limbs jerking as it followed us. We locked ourselves in my bedroom, shoving a dresser against the door. The jingling grew louder, accompanied by a deep, guttural growl. "What does it want?" Danny whispered, tears streaming down his face. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we couldn't stay there. I pushed open the window, helping Danny climb onto the roof. The snowstorm was blinding, but it was our only chance. Just as I climbed out, the door burst open and the Santa figurine lunged. I kicked it as hard as I could, sending it crashing into the dresser. We scrambled down the side of the house and into the snow-covered yard. The storm was relentless, the wind howling as we ran toward the neighbor's house. Behind us, the jingling bells grew louder, accompanied by that awful laugh. We pounded on the neighbor's door, screaming for help. The lights inside flickered on, and Mr. Jenkins, our elderly neighbor, opened the door. "What's going on?" he asked, but his expression turned to horror as he looked past us. I turned to see the Santa figurine standing at the edge of the yard, its eyes glowing like embers. "It won't stop," I gasped. "It's after us." Mr. Jenkins grabbed his shotgun and fired, but the figure didn't flinch. Instead, it tilted its head, as if mocking us, before vanishing into the storm. We never went back to the house. The police found no trace of my parents or the Santa figurine. The house was declared abandoned, left to rot on Cedar Lane. Every Christmas since, I've heard the faint jingle of bells. And every year, I wonder, was it just that house? Or is there something darker about Christmas that we don't understand? Santa isn't always the jolly man in red. Sometimes, he's something far, far worse.